If others examined themselves attentively as I do, they would find themselves, as I do, full of inanity and nonsense. Get rid of it I cannot without getting rid of myself. We're all steeped in it, one as much as another. But those who are aware of it are a little better off. Michel de Montaigne wrote that, one of the most significant philosophers of the French Renaissance. So before you think, blimey, Neil, your reading list has expanded, I actually read it as a quote at the start of a book I'm reading about the broadcaster Justin Webb, which is a fascinating read in itself. But the quote as I read it is about having this wonderful freedom to be you, to be the authentic you, which I will come to in a moment. But let me make a picture of where we start the walk today. My sketchbook to start the walk. I'm in the industrial part of a river walk I often take, which is actually a really good walk for myself and Barnes to make. Lots of footpath, lots of towpath rather, to read your letters on. 7.1 f7.1, shutter speed 6/40th, ISO 160. It's a disused warehouse, which has a wonderful reflection in the river. Here we go. A sketchbook to start the day.
The Photowalk.
I just met a guy called Kevin. Sounds like a song. Just met a guy called Kevin, who was cycling along the towpath. I met him the other day, actually, when a tree had fallen across part of the path, much further up from here. And he was literally having to post his bike through the trees. And I meant to make a picture of him then, but I thought that felt a bit cruel to me, actually, because he looked like he got through. By the time I got there, the last wheel was going through. But he looked proper puffed, actually, having done that. And today he was taking a more gentle cycle along the path. No trees in his way. I know I should have made a portrait. I know, I can see you looking at me as well, saying, come on, practice what you preach. I will next time. I think I'm going to see Kev again, I'm sure. The more astute of you, so that probably isn't my other listener, will notice a further top of the programme tweak. I like a good quote or a thought for the day, as you know by the PS at the end of each show. That won't move or change, by the way. I just thought the right sort of appropriate thoughts at the start of a show could match my guest or perhaps a particular letter in the programme. And today I think it happens to be my guest, who is one of my more, let's say, enthusiastic, authentic, won the lottery with every sentence kind of guests, as you will no doubt find out and appreciate in a while when you meet him as well. Mark Creamer is in my hall of thank you very much Lees today for this wonderful introduction to photographer Paul Choi's work. Actually, it was a little while back. When I say a little, was it about a year originally? And it was a particular newsletter that was about the cultural importance of, wait for it, Thai boxing. And no, this isn't a programme today about Thai boxing. It's not my primary conversational reason for having reached out to Paul, but it was a cracking story, and I'll remember to put the link, of course, on the show page. But it's his, Paul, it's his interest, photographically and writing cultural stories, or as he puts it so much more eloquently in his biography, documenting beautifully unscripted moments of everyday life around the world. It was that piqued my curiosity. Dear diary, when I grow up, I want to be able to write just like that. But it's Paul's sheer enthusiasm for life with a camera that I enjoy, and you're about to enjoy too, I hope.
Today on the Photowalk.
Actually, when you look, we are far more alike than we are different. Yeah. And those differences are always superficial.
It's the Photowalk, you and I making some pictures with our cameras or smartphones, sketchbooking our walks together, enjoying the letters and inspirational stories you've shared. A show for photographers of whatever kind, a show for those who like walking, or those who like to explore or find escapism and peace away from the noise of this world, putting miles under our feet and making a picture or three to remind us of where those footprints were left. All made possible by our extra milers and mpb.com. I use mpb.com It's a great way to buy and sell and trade used camera gear online. And I know it because I use them myself, as I say, to buy quality new-to-me kit. I've used them for lenses, for camera bodies. My X100V came from them. And if you're buying, you get peace of mind with a 6-month guarantee. And if you're trading or selling, MPB will send a courier to pick up your kit on a day you specify once it's arrived back at their warehouse and gone through the checks to make sure it's all been graded properly online. When you traded it in, you get paid direct into your account, and the best thing is you get paid quickly. mpb.com is a very easy to use website, and it's helping photographers to buy quality used kit or sell gear you no longer need to free up cash and give others a chance to make their stories. Go to mpb.com and I'll have a link on today's show page. So, on the show today, I need to right a wrong. I've been fact-checked. What, you, Neil? Really? About something I fear I've got naively incorrect, and it only seems right that we'll start with an apology right at the head of the show, in a mo. And it all rhymes. Also today, being just a bloke with a camera, the title of a letter which applies to us all in some ways, bloke or otherwise, really. We talk big bridges and aerial views that knock your Swedish socks sideways. There's a little bit of talk about AI, but not too much that you should hide behind your sofa just yet. We have a new-ish assignment, and I'll take you momentarily into Africa, or we'll hear from one of our extra milers. So, checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's, check. Walking boots, check. Drone. What? Drone? You've never mentioned drone before. There's a reason for it. Well, I haven't got one, but we'll check it off the list, shall we? Yes. Because you might be inspired later on, after you've heard one of the letters today, to go buy one. Maybe from mpb.com. Hint. Let's walk. On the quotes front, I'd also love to start the show with quotes that you've seen, perhaps some thoughts that you live by. Maybe not too pithy, because we tend to save the pithier ones. We save the brevity for the closing PS. I know you probably have one, because you're good at stuff like that. It might even be something that, toward Christmas, he says, having a live thought, as I walk, we could perhaps do a holiday special. I don't know, because these thoughts that we've been receiving in terms of those that are guests that are sharing their whys, that in particular interests me for a book. Do you want to go in the water? Go on then. It's very deep there, pups. Really, his swimming's not great. I mean, he's not a water baby as far as dogs are concerned. Come on, pups. We'll find there's a beach up here, well, sort of, that you can use there. Right, let's start. This is not a letter, but it's a little light and shade, as directly after it, AI is going to rear up in Cobra-like fashion for a moment. So I thought, light, shade. I think perhaps you finally arrive when you get fact-checked. Not that what I get wrong will change the course of destiny or government ministers to fall from grace, but Lord knows, I mean, I make mistakes every single week. You know that. But before we start, it seems I was a tad naive, or perhaps it worked for what was loosely termed comedy in terms of the picture that was formed when I made my mistake. But in our Facebook group, I've spent some time in there this week, which is it's been a miss of me that I've not spent much time in there the last couple of months making programs, etc. So it does take a while, but yeah, there's been some cracking stuff in there this week, and I noticed Sue Byrne in our Facebook group posted a picture of goldfish baked snack crackers, cheddar, 100% cheese, which I take to mean no cheese flavouring. To explain, dear other listener, in episode 385, Conquering Life's Mountains, I went a walking in Snowdonia with our friend Andy Fisher, and right at the head of the show, we were talking about a good hiker's snack, or the snacks that you should pack in your rucksack. And on the list that I searched for online, because I did my research, it came up with a suggestion of goldfish. Now, this did surprise me because I tend to think of goldfish, rightly or wrongly, definitely because of winning one at the local fair age 6 or 7. I know they were very different times. As the small friend that swims in circles around a tiny aquarium and never gets bored because it has the attention span of a place your least favourite politician's name here. So goldfish being in the list of snacks, I did a few cursory click-throughs, and Google Land revealed some convincing words to me at the time about how tuna and goldfish are excellent sources of protein. So I put it down to some sort of weird pescatarian hiker's snack that I'd never heard of or seen before. Turns out the advice for hiking snacks may not actually really be real goldfish, no, and I know you knew that, but instead these goldfish-shaped snack crackers. So perhaps I was being a bit daft, and Chris Canham, who was also in the thread to this, who was suggesting he was disappointed I didn't explain the snacks properly on the show. There's your reason. Seems I could have been misleading you, Chris. Or rather, I was willing to believe that people chomble down on our golden-coloured fin-wibbling friends. But I did go and research, because I thought, because I thought, no, it definitely said that. And here's the list. This is the list that I read. Peanut butter and bananas, get that, check. Beef jerky, makes sense. Fresh or dried fruit, yes. I took some dried apricots up, actually. Granola, yes. Veggies, yes. Nuts and seeds. Tuna and goldfish. See? It's there, black and white. But to put this one to bed, I typed, "Can you eat a goldfish?" once again. And I came up with, and I think I might have said this to you before, so this underlines it. Goldfish are bottom feeders, and their habitat in murky waters is where they're often described as tasting like mud. And small goldfish have very little meat, but lots of inedible bones. Deboning them is a pain. So I can only assume the goldfish being suggested was, in fact, these snack crackers. They're probably easier to take up the mountain with you, because who wants to spend an hour deboning a goldfish when you're on a hike halfway up a mountain? It's not exactly the white bait of the mountain climbing community, and I think I've realised that now. Is everybody happy with this answer? Are you? Good. Let's close the case, as they say, on this one. And so from the lights we go to the shade with this. Camille Daniels contacted me a couple of weeks back. Was it a couple of months, couple of weeks? It was a little way back, and he sent me a link, or at least I think it was Camille who sent me this link, because underneath the salutation was from his AI assistant. So it may have been Camille's AI assistant. Hi, Neil. A link regarding AI and mental health, which, Camille, I've now popped onto the show page along with your Instagram link, because I think after you've followed the YouTube link that Camille sent in, or Camille's assistant, I don't know, you might need a moment with Camille's wonderfully serene, beautiful steps and frames in the real world of nature. And that picture, by the way, you made on June the 25th, of the deer just peeking through the gap in the forest. Oh, absolutely amazing, wonderful, beautiful, and any other adjective I could possibly find along those lines. Anyway, the link Camille sent in is from an interview on a podcast by Lex Fridman. And by the way, if you think my episodes are long, Lex's often can stretch toward the over 3 hour mark. He goes really deep into the topics. And in this particular link, it's a conversation with Mark Zuckerberg about the future of AI in social media. And actually, it's fascinating. Not that it wouldn't be, but I thought for a moment, oh no, but it was really fascinating. And I think you summed it up as well. It's definitely a 3 coffees and 2 packs of Garibaldi's watch. It is long, and I'm still yet to finish it, I'll be honest, but finish it I will. But yes, as Camille, you've nailed this one, because as you say, you know, AI is not scaring me. It's how the people creating the AI see the future world that actually scares me. And that, I think, is a very interesting distinction and an angle that's certainly not a sideshow, but perhaps not as openly discussed when we get all excited about it and what it can do in terms of pictures and voices and writing and composing and etc., etc., etc. I've picked out a moment, well, I picked out a moment that struck me, and you might consider it's a strange moment to pick when you think of all that gets discussed in this film. It's around about 52 minutes in, where Mark is asked whether one day we'll have a scenario where we'll use social networks. Like I suppose WhatsApp would be a good example. To talk with our friends, wait for it, chatbot. Yeah, let me repeat that. We would go onto WhatsApp to talk to one of our friends, chatbots. I.e., if you and I are talking, we might not actually be. I mean, you'll be talking to me, or so you think. But it'll be my bot, because I'd have gone off for a walk without my phone, with Sabarkalot. And at this particular point, and this is the reason it struck me, at this point, Mark Zuckerberg seems to relish that possibility and talks it's either then or a bit later on in the piece, perhaps a bit earlier, that AI could possibly help us be better friends. And, right on cue, hello, Pinstriped Express, all pushed up against the windows, Barnes, see? No room at all. Yeah, and I was left thinking, the day you need AI to help you be a better friend, perhaps there's some social advantages, I'm not thinking of them right now, but the day you need that, I don't know, I really am struggling to find a good reason why AI might help you to be a better friend. You'll no doubt have some thoughts about this. I'll leave it with you. When we set off for the walk this morning, the blue skies were there. Hardly a cloud, actually, at one stage. I thought, oh no, I've not brought my hat. Basic mistake. I'll be in trouble. Sam will say, did you take your hat? How was your day? Was it good? But these clouds that are coming across now are providing a bit of respite to me, which is good. And for my forehead. And they look a bit angry. Oh, these make cracking. Here we go. I'm going to employ dear Steve Shipman's advice. Look up, because it tells a story of the day, and I'm going to do that. Oh, I'm going to need my neutral density filter. I'm using my X100V, which has a built-in neutral density filter, and I've programmed it to the top plate. And I'm going to I tell you what I'll do. I'll move along slightly so there's this beautiful rich blue just on the left, and this encroaching, angry-looking, fierce rain cloud coming towards us. Shutter speed 1300, f3.6, ISO 160. Doesn't really need to be 3.6. Actually, f8 will be fantastic, and I can remove the neutral density filter then. There we go, 3500th shutter speed, f8, 160. Let's do a take two on this one. Bear with me, Barnes. Oh, hold on, another one. Got it. He's looking at me in that. Come on. There's my beach a bit further along here. I know, we'll find the beach so you can have a swim. On the Mark Zuckerberg thing, I know you know this, but the clickbaity news came out in the last week or so that Elon Musk has issued a sparring challenge to Mark. Elon is a man. Now, I know, I don't know, actually, what you think of Elon. I have my own thoughts. But he does his due diligence, I'm sure. But I'm not sure that he has on this one, actually, because Mark Zuckerberg is a martial arts practitioner. I mean, he goes to practice in the jungle, for heaven's sakes, with some of the practitioning That's the wrong word, I know, that he does. And Elon certainly is not. I don't think he is anyway. He's 70 pounds heavier. How they know that, I don't know. What are celebrities made to pop up what they weigh each day? Yeah, I'm this. Or do we know that because of a space program? Or I don't know how we know that. But he's definitely 12 or 13 years, if I done my maths correctly, Mark's senior. I'm not sure this is a fair fight. It's probably all over this new rival to Twitter, Mark Zuckerberg's or Meta's Threads platform. Have you joined it yet? I've joined it as Neil James. I will probably put the Photowalk there. You get to a stage, don't you, where you think, what social platforms should I engage with? And if you have too many, you don't do them well enough, I think. So you kind of have to make a choice. And I don't know. I don't like the changes that happened at Twitter. And I'm basing that purely on the way people were treated. And Mark Zuckerberg, there's parts of his practice I'm not so keen on. But Twitter, stroke Threads, it's... I would imagine not Twitter stroke Threads as in being the same thing, one or t'other. I would imagine Threads is going to be, because he has a habit of doing this in the social media world, and let's be fair, he knows his social media. You can buy social media, but Mark knows his social media. I sense that Threads is going to be quite important, and it links seamlessly well with Instagram as well, and that's got to be an advantage as well, hasn't it? It's all very testosterone flinging fighting talk though, isn't it, really? Make love, not war, I say. Barnes, trademark that one. What do you mean? It's already been done. How do you know it's already been penned? Obvious, is it? Right, here is a very honest, authentic, since I have a feeling that it's going to be a buzzword of today's show, authentic, I don't know why I'm going into my inner Essex with that, letter from Kelvin Brown, first-time writer. You're very welcome, and I have a small jump for joy, a modest jump for joy when somebody writes in for the first time. This letter comes with a title, Just a Bloke Who Makes Pictures. Insert alternative gender here. Kelvin writes, I'm a rough and ready type. I guess I'm not too artistic or touchy-feely. So when I discovered your podcast some time ago, around about episode 120, yes, that is a while ago, I started to look forward to listening during my working day. I did feel, I know because I've read the letter now, but I did feel at that point, I thought there's a but coming up here, isn't there? And sure enough, it arrived at platform 2. But after a mishap which saw me tear a tendon in my shoulder, forcing me to retire from my windscreen fitting profession after 35 years, ouch. During 12 months off, I lapsed in my listening. I'm not surprised. I think you got the perfect excuse. That sounds not only physically very painful, but mentally very challenging as well, of course. During the year where I didn't work, I went on a few... Oh, look, he's found the water. Go on, Pups, in you go. Go on, Pups. Oh, have you had enough, have you? Go on, in you go. Good boy. I'm just reading Kelvin's letter. Enjoy a swim. During the year where I didn't work, I went on a few photo walks around my hometown of Wisbech, also Blakeney and Dersingham Bog in Norfolk. It's a wonderful name, isn't it? Dersingham Bog. But even raising a camera to my eye became slightly problematic for me. I can imagine. Ouch, I've just stung myself. Oh, the nettles here are fierce. Look, I'm wearing really good walking pants. These I should not be able to get... Oh, look at that, beautiful. I'm digressing all over the place here, Kelvin. Look at that, is that an Admiral butterfly? Admiral? No, it's another name, isn't it? It's something else, Admiral. Anyway, Kelvin, forgive me, but just filling in the blanks of the area, Dersingham Bog is a site of special scientific interest for all kinds of geological reasons and attracts all kinds of scientists to study it. We could actually run an entire show about it. Perhaps a walk. Now, there's an idea, Kelvin. The Dersingham Bog Walk. A funny title to boot as well. Little known Dersingham Bog fact, whilst wincing about the pain you were going through, Kelvin, and researching Dersingham Bog. It's the location of a bench which commemorates the life of American singer-songwriter and environmentalist John Denver, no less. It was placed there by the Friends of John Denver UK in September 2006, not so long ago. I did go looking for John Denver facts to see if he'd been to Dersingham Bog. I don't think he ever did. I think really the seat is about celebrating his sincere love, which he had, for the environment. Anyway, Kelvin, 321, back in the room, back to you. Thankfully, after a year, my shoulder is back to 95% normal. And so I'm glad to be able to raise my camera without any discomfort. And even better news, I now have another job. And actually, I've been able to catch up, even doing 3 episodes a day at times. What, Kelvin? There's clearly a cure for your shoulder that's called time and care, but not for the podcast consumption. My word, I prescribe a darkened room and a packet of milk chocolate hobnobs. I mean, we've had to go further than Garibaldi's for this cure. I think you're seriously in need of help. Nurse, the screens. I take my cameras with me, says Kelvin. My Lumix TZ or TZ60, my Canon 7D, 550D and phone. My word, you're properly packed with cameras. Nothing too fancy, and I've been he said, and I've been prompted to do a 365 since a recent episode, which I think is a cracking idea. And remember, I always say you don't have to start on Jan 1st. You can start a 365 whenever you like. I started mine in spring, but I've been catching up. Catching up might not be the right phrase, but I posted more than I intended to at times, and actually my intention is to finish a little bit early on December 31st. That's the intention, at any rate. I tried some ICM, intentional camera movement, after hearing the Bill Ward edition. A shot of rapeseed and grey sky like a Ukrainian battle-scarred flag. My word, how poetic. And it is. It's a very powerful picture. I shall put that on the show page, and you can share in the delights of seeing that picture that was sent in. And also streets with varying success. Well, I think you certainly hit success with the ICM, if I may be so bold. Like most, I started with 35mm in the 80s, but only used high street processing and lapsed for 20 years. Then digital arrived, followed by Flickr and Vero, which allowed me to see other photographers' work. I don't have a particular preference for my hobby photography, you know. I'm just a bloke with a camera travelling around shooting where and when an opportunity arises. Thank you for your show. Your guests have been interesting, I'd say, and inspiring. I find them very inspiring. I'll share that with you. I look forward to every Friday. The show just flies. Kelvin, most people complain it's far too long. Have a word with them, would you? One day I may even try one of your now monthly assignments. Well, we're starting one very shortly, so no time like the present, although this is a tough one. Oh, I say tough is not the right word. No, it's not tough. This one is slightly a tad more challenging than some that we've had. It'll certainly make you think, that's for sure. All the best, Kelvin, from the most photographically uninspiring parts of England, the Fens of Cambridgeshire. Here are a couple of pictures and links to my Instagram, Flickr and Vero, all of which, as I said, in particular, that wonderful ICM I shall share on the show page. Kelvin, the Fens of eastern England land, they may be a little flat, but look at some of the most amazing sights and attributes that you have for that area, such as the Great Fen, the Fen Rivers. I mean, it's a fantastic place to go if you like bird photography. It's a wonderful place for bird photography. You've got wildfowl, you've got wetlands, and Dennis of Grunty Fen. What? Dennis of Watty what? Who will probably, and sadly, mean nothing to everyone listening. Well, maybe, just maybe, a couple of listeners who live in the Fens with a very particular radio listening habit from the 80s and 90s. Dennis of Grunty Fen. He was a Fenlands character. He was played by a country and folk, maybe more folk singer called Pete Sayers. Rest in peace. It was sort of light comedy, based, I suppose, upon the cliche that those who live in the deeper fens may unknowingly, unwittingly share a deep south stereotype with. I'm probably being very clumsy there, and should rescue myself. I will require fact checking, though I did look up Dennis of Grunty Fen on YouTube. I thought, no, I mean, it was well before YouTube, so there won't be anything there. And look, there was. YouTube, I never doubted you. There's a recording of him from 1991 doing the cheese wire sketch a long, long time ago, I appreciate. But the thing is, and the reason why I'm mentioning this, because it does seem a bit abstract, is I remembered that episode, the cheese wire sketch, because I was a fledgling BBC newbie programme assistant stroke producer, and I produced that very show. How about that? I did note, by the way, there was no credit for the cut and splicer on the film at the end, but it was a real trip down memory lane, and one of those, oh my word, surprising moments. Being just a bloke with a camera, I was about to say we're never just anything. He says, playing Tuppenny Halfpennyologist, but you know, maybe there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe there isn't anything wrong with the word just. Maybe that is our superpower. We just make pictures that just make us happy, or just a bit more informed, that sometimes make others even happier and even more informed. And my guest today will underline that to quite a large extent. And I think that in itself is a worthy pursuit. Right, to today's guest then, Paul Choi. I love a good accidental success story. Accidental insofar that Paul came across photography as a way to introduce himself to a new chapter in his life, new neighbours in his life. But that is where the act of saying hello with a camera, as he was, morphs into a whole load of hard work to make stuff happen thereafter. And if enthusiasm is infectious, and it's been a long time since I felt comfortable to use that as a metaphor, then I think I found somebody with bucket loads of it for you. He's a photographer, he is a documentarian, he is a TEDx speaker, he is a traveller, he's an enthusiast of and for life with a camera, and he is, it seems to be, on a quest to find the good people of this planet. And there are more good than bad, I truly believe that. Well, it's true, isn't it? But sometimes it may not seem it when you watch the news, I know, but there are more good than bad. Are actually more alike than we sometimes think, as you're about to find out with Paul Choi. From the very moment, Paul, I meet your work on your website, I'm greeted by what feels like a very emotive mission statement. And I'm going to quote it, if you don't mind. I am an internationally published documentary photographer and writer specialising in sharing stories of the beautifully unscripted moments of everyday life I encounter all over the world. Which, as a sentence, well, you had me at I, but I suppose you'd be able to make a trip to the shops to buy a pint of milk and make it into an adventure by the sound of it.
It's absolutely true. I think the characteristic about my own work, which I enjoy most, is celebrating everyday life.
Yeah.
And I think that in recent decades, I suppose it's always been the case, but we are, as a society, we are probably guilty of becoming increasingly celebrity obsessed, whereas the lives of the celebrities have never really interested me. I'm always interested in the people standing right behind those celebrities. Even as a child, I remember I used to enjoy really looking at historical photographs. I used to be fascinated by the history section of a book or something like that. And there'd always be some sort of photograph. And of course, there would be the star of the photograph, but often standing behind them with the crowds watching on. And I found myself more drawn to those people standing behind. And so I've always, through my work, I've always found myself drawn to the everyday stories, the things that we can relate to if they're observed and pointed out, because often we need them pointing out. So yes, I like to celebrate the everyday unscripted moments, that I just discover as I'm walking on my way to the shop to get a pint of milk.
Well, you mentioned it, so it's your fault. But I wonder where, because I grew up in a house where we had the Sunday supplements. Dad would guard over them, wouldn't be able to look at them till he'd had them. It was a period where Sunday supplements and newspapers were full of pictures and news stories from around the world. And then we sort of made this transition into celebrity culture. I wonder where it happened.
We've always been fascinated by celebrities.
Yeah.
If we go back to the 1500s, and we had the celebrity playwrights, or we had the latest thing that was imported into the country for people to see, or whatever. Yeah. There's always been a fascination with celebrity. Yeah. But now, with our connected world, now we feel perhaps more connected or closely connected with those celebrities. Yeah. So before, we used to read about them in the Sunday supplement, but now we can see their self-filmed video from first thing in the morning as they've gone to the bathroom. So now it feels like we're more connected. Now, of course, it only feels like we're more connected because those celebrities will be carefully managing how they are portrayed. But I think there's always been that sense of celebrity culture, but we've also been fascinated with each other. People watching has been a pastime forever. Something I don't know about you, but I love watching the colorized videos from the films from the 1900s.
Oh,
you see where they've archived footage where they're showing from Paris or wherever, and the colorization, it just adds something to it. It makes you more connected. And I love when you're seeing people sitting in 1902. They're sitting in a cafe in Paris, just watching people go by. What I do is just a glorified version of people watching. And that's been something, while we've been fascinated with the celebrity culture, humanity has always been fascinated with each other as well.
This intrigue for people watching, I like to call it professional nosiness. By the way, Paul, when my clients, ask what I do, I sound professionally nosy. You're giving me pound notes to actually stare, which is a marvellous job. But this intrigue for adventure started in your childhood, as you mentioned. But I'm intrigued at what age did you start to carry this famous notepad and camera everywhere, and you found the confidence to just approach complete strangers and say, "Hello, I'm Paul"?
Well, I think the confidence to approach complete strangers has always been there, and it's something that's got me into trouble more than once throughout my childhood and early years. The long school holidays have just started for many parts of the world at the moment, and so there are armies of children that suddenly got the newfound freedom. I remember distinctly those long summer holidays were a time of exploration. Now that carried on for me as I got older. In my late teens, I went on holiday to Spain. Yep. I went to visit the Balearic Islands. I went for 2 weeks, and 4 years later I came back. And so that exploration has always been with me. That sense of talking to people has always been with me. But the sense of documenting it, that's actually relatively new. Now, please don't let the secret out of the bag, especially to any of my clients. But actually, I haven't been doing this as long as people might think. I actually spent an entire career in the corporate world. I spent 20 years working in a very corporate industry. In fact, probably the most creative thing that I did was conditional formatting on an Excel spreadsheet.
What? You've lost me already.
I was very good at color coding my spreadsheets.
Right.
And perhaps that's the way I express myself. And then I stopped and thought about it. Over the years, as the years rack on and you're 22, you close your eyes and you wake up in your late 30s, and then you're in your 40s and you're thinking, well, where the heck did those couple of decades go to?
Tell me.
I didn't want being good at spreadsheets. I didn't want that to be my superpower. So in a period of self-reflection, others might call it a midlife crisis, I took something of a sabbatical with my family. I was in the UK at the time. I'd been working in the UK for some time. We decided to take 6 months out. My wife and I just had started a family. We had young children at the time. And you have those kind of moments where you're thinking, what's it all about? And so I came to Mauritius, an island which I have a connection with because my father's actually from Mauritius.
Well,
my mother
you're
is
part
English.
Mauritian, aren't you? Yes.
Yes. So my father's Mauritian. My mother is English.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I came to Mauritius, really, which was a trip of discovery. I hadn't spent any particular time on the island before, and it was going to be a 6-month stay. After about 6 weeks, I did the similar exercise to I did in my late teens going to Spain. After about 6 weeks, I said, let's just stay.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, okay, but now what am I going to do? And so the photography came along by accident. And so I guess I picked up a camera in earnest around about 11 years ago, 12 years ago. And I used it as an icebreaker because I was being on the island exploring. It was a little bit weird just walking up to people and starting to speak to them, which is something I've always done. And I realized that the camera was a nice icebreaker. It was good for me to record my memories.
It's a superpower.
And that's it. It's this new superpower. It's this way. And it made sense to people.
But there's still an A to B part of the story of turning saying hello on a walk into a way of earning money to keep house, Paul. And for you, it was sharing on social media, wasn't it? Although, and this is a very good lesson for anyone who thinks they'll never get more than a handful of likes, because when you started sharing, the numbers were, shall we say, modest?
3 people liked them, one of which was always my mother, so that doesn't really count. So 2 people were liking my photographs.
No, Paul, it always counts. Mum has to be the first like of every post, if Mum still was.
Well, she still is now. But then I noticed something interesting, because then 300 people were liking them, and then 3,000. Yeah. Within about 6 or 7 months, I noticed that 30,000 people were liking my posts, and my social media following grew quite fast, quite quickly. And so then I had people starting to call me and say, well, could you take photographs for me? And the answer was, yes, I can. Yeah. And then they started saying, well, can you go to New York and take photographs of me? And the answer was, yes, I can. And so it very much happened by accident. And I think what happened is exactly that, catching these spontaneous moments. None of the work I was producing, none of the photographs I was producing, and again, letting the secrets out of the bag, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was photographing what interested me because I was exploring for my own interest. And so I think what I was doing is I was documenting everyday moments that I just came across with no planning, no preparation. But I think I just tapped into a mood of the moment, because within a year of picking up a camera and giving it a go to see what I could discover, I was doing international projects.
You were out on NGO work and all sorts of. I mean, for many photographers, you are still living the dream. It's that. Well, how can I get to do what Paul does? He travels to these amazing places. He tells stories in the style he wants to tell them. No brief, no spreadsheet brief. Throw the spreadsheets away. And some might say there's a serendipity involved in this. That when you don't try too hard to make an impression can sometimes find you. Now, I know some people will say, Neil, that sounds all a bit woo-woo, but I do believe that, and I think that's partly to blame for your, if blame is not too negative a word, for your success.
I think that one of the things certainly for my own case, I've done a lot of work with corporate bodies. I've worked a lot with companies in my photography career. I've also done a lot of work with social organizations, in particular NGOs working in different areas of social justice or environmental issues or things like that. Now, I think that although I was talking perhaps dismissively about my time in the corporate world, one thing that time did give me was an understanding of what it's like to sit on the other side of the table. So I think that I was able to speak the language of the people who were commissioning that work and making sure that I ticked their boxes. And I think that because I had that knowledge of sitting on the other side of the table, it meant that I was able to approach it in perhaps a more with a little bit more empathy.
But knowing that world, has that made it any easier to set about being a photographer in the commercial world, or has it been as hard for you as it would be for me?
It is incredibly hard to create a financially viable business in photography, especially in the industry as it is at the moment. And even recently, I was given a talk to a group of university students studying journalism and photography. And afterwards, there was it was open to anybody. It was at university, it was open to anybody. And there was a lady who came to speak to me afterwards, and she said that she really enjoys photography. She particularly enjoys documentary photography. She's currently a lawyer, but she's been thinking that that's not what she wants wants to do. She wants to do similar to the projects that I'm doing. She wants to go out and tell stories of social injustice around the world. And what she asked, her question was, should she just quit a job and go for it? And I know what she wanted me to say. What she wanted me to say is, sometimes you just have to take a risk. You go for it. You take your chances. The answer I actually gave her is no, do not quit your job, because it is incredibly hard to pay the bills, but do pursue your dream. So you have to work. If this is something you want to make work, you have to work 2 full-time jobs. You have to do your day job, and then you have to pursue what it is that you want to do as your passion, and hope that you can get to that day where it builds up.
Well, let me just, if you don't mind, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wrote down some words here. And this perhaps contradicts what you're saying. Let's haven't totally understood. And it's a good opportunity to talk about your TED Talk. I love a good TED Talk, by the way, Paul. And you've been on the famous Red Dot, and I'm going to come back and ask you some questions about that in a moment. But you did say at the start of your talk, and I'm happy to go back and clip and quote you, there's never been a better time to be a photographer. Has your mind changed then? I don't know.
No, absolutely no. This is the best time to be a photographer. But there is a big difference between being a photographer and paying your bills.
Right.
And so if you want to pay your bills, I don't want to sound like I'm on a downer. I'm really not. Anybody with drive and talent, I truly believe, can be successful in this industry. Even now, even with the onslaught of all the doom and gloom that we hear, how AI is going to take over our industry, or how digital cameras, when they came out, were going to destroy the film industry, and so on. I still think it's one of the best times to be a photographer for 2 reasons. Firstly, the amount of resources out there. You can absolutely learn everything that you might need by watching online videos. Readily available for free.
Yes.
There are loads of books that you can download. There are loads of people who are happy to just share their knowledge. So there are absolutely loads of people who have written very useful, very valid ebooks on photography, or ebooks on different subjects that they happily give away for free because they're just sharing the knowledge. Yeah. There is a community who are engaged, and it has to be said that many of us are kind of photography nerds. So given the opportunity to talk about photography, we absolutely will.
Absolutely.
On and on and on. Yeah. So, and so this modern age has allowed us to connect in ways that we couldn't before. The barrier to entry, I believe, is much lower. Anybody with a camera and the enthusiasm can become a photographer and become a proficient photographer. I shy away from the word successful photographer because people have their own definition of success. I definitely fall into the school of thought of anything you have that captures a photograph is great. If it works, it works. And so I think it's a great opportunity to be a photographer.
Well, if anybody can be a photographer, but not everybody can be a storyteller, though, can there? And there's a distinct difference there, isn't there?
Entirely different.
Yeah.
And, I something that I think about quite often, again, the photography nerd in us, that we do love a good quote, don't we? And somebody, and I can't remember who, somebody said photography is where art and science meet. Yeah. And I do believe that. I think photography is a great collision of science and art. Yeah. But, and here's the important thing for me, art is always more important. So although the two collide, for me, the art is more important.
Well, I certainly think we're singing from the same well-thumbed hymn book on that one. But is there any kind of formula for making the transition to becoming professional that you've identified? I suppose I'm looking for a silver bullet answer, really, from someone who's gone from making pictures of people in his new community as a way to make friends to making pictures and telling stories around the world of the most interesting people in their cultures. It is a kind of living the dream job for me, as I can identify anyway.
For me, and again, I always bring it back that I think that to be the photographer you want to be, you must photograph for an audience of one. You must photograph the things that please you. Yeah. And if others like it as well, then great. But you can't photograph what you believe other people might like. And for me, I was always drawn to the storytelling of photography. And that's something that I pursue in my own work. I like a photograph that I can keep coming back to. And I think if we go back to the photographs that have inspired over the years, certainly ones that have inspired me. When we think about something like lunch atop a skyscraper, the Rockefeller Center, 1932, the photograph of all the guys having their lunch on. Yeah, exactly. There's story there. We can keep looking at it. Yeah. When we think of something like the work of Dorothea Lange or something like Steve McCurry with his Afghan girl, these are all storytelling photographs. So the photographs, for me, the photographs that stand the test of time are the ones that tell some sort of story, something where they transport us in time to that moment. That's not to disrespect those pretty photographs. For myself, as someone that appreciates the photographs, I like the story within it.
Well, look, I want to talk about some of your stories in a moment.
Sure.
Just very quickly, I do want to know what it feels like to stand on the TED Talk Red Dot. I doubt many people will ever get that opportunity in their life. I hear that it's very nerve-wracking. You can't move outside the circle, and you're not allowed to use PowerPoint.
Mm-hmm. So some of that is true and some of it's not true.
Right.
So let me get to the things that's not true. You can use PowerPoint, but, and here's the thing, you can't use presenter mode. So, of course, the actual presentations are on PowerPoint, but you can't see the slide that's coming ahead.
Right.
So you have to memorize it. And in my own case, the first thing, being on the red dot, nerve-wracking, fortunately for me, no. I don't have a problem in front of crowds. I never have. It's just peculiar to me. What I have a problem with, where I go to pieces, is if one of them comes to speak to me afterwards. I'm not great with the small talk. I do think I made the organizers nervous because, honestly, the TED Talks have a very specific format. And they are polished. One of the things about them is they are very polished. So you have to submit your script around 2 months in advance. Then they start the rehearsals. And so the first rehearsal will be about 6 weeks in advance. And then they work right up to the end.
Goodness.
That's what normally happens. Yeah. In my case, I was on assignment pretty much all of the time. So I kept saying, yeah, I'll get the script to you. And about 10 days out, I still hadn't got it to them. Then we did a rehearsal the day before. Well, I'd written half of the script, so I only rehearsed half of it. So truth be told, I actually finished writing the script that morning. And the first time that the organizers heard my talk was the first time that I gave it. And the thing I love about the TED Talks, etc., is this idea of sharing knowledge.
Yes.
And you know, for me, that's something that I find fascinating. I love the way that these talks can bring together people from all different walks of humanity with all different points of view. And there's engagement to it.
Well, the stories you shared were what makes people more alike than indifferent or different to each other, which I found a really interesting piece, particularly because you're talking about it with regard to photography. And you went on an incredible voyage of discovery with your cameras. And one of the places you went to was Africa and West Africa. Actually, we're doing a trip to the Gambia in 2024, a place that I absolutely adore. But you found the same as I did in Ghana, I think, in the West too. It was one particular visit you made to a fishing village that you really learned about community. And that bit for me, it was almost like a massive light bulb, Paul, because I thought, that's what I saw in the Gambia. It's incredible, isn't it, how community works together. And I think that you found this in a lot of the stories that you made around the world.
You know, I feel like at the moment we live through an age of populism. Currently. Now, of course, everything swings backwards and forwards. That's the nature of people. We always circle back. Right now, we're on a spiral of populism. And part of that populism is the politics of division. So we hear lots of, they're not like us. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. There's lots of they, us and them. But I have to say that traveling around the world, and I am fortunate that I have traveled extensively. My camera has taken me all over the world, and chaotically, you see, if you're going to go around the world, if you decide to do a round the world voyage, normally you plan a logical route. You start at one point, move to the next country, and go that way around. Whereas I found myself in a chaotic journey because it was driven largely by projects that came up and assignments. So I might be, let's say, in Rome, in Italy, and I'll get a phone call to say, could you be in Tokyo tomorrow? So I'll say, sure. and I'll be in Tokyo the next day, but then a week later I'll be in, let's say, Toronto. And so I was zigzagging around the world. Now, what that means is that you don't see a gradual change in people. If you move in a logical way slowly around the world, there is a gradual change in culture. But when you dip in and out, you see the sudden change of culture. And I love the differences between us all. I hope we never lose that. I hope we don't lose the cultural quirks that we've got. But they are just quirks. They're just the small things as to whether this country prefers that type of music or that type of music, or whether they eat this type of food or that type of food. The basics of our species are pretty much exactly the same all over the world. Everywhere I go, people enjoy spending time with their family. People enjoy friends. The traditions, the family and familial connections are the same all over the world. And something that I find is the spirit of community. When you mentioned about Ghana, I was in a village called Elmina, I think you're talking about, which is a fishing village. And everybody's got their own fishing boats. And it is chaotic. You go to the fish market first thing in the morning when the boats are coming back. You have never seen chaos like this. And yet it was organized chaos. Now, each of those fishing boat captains had their own catch of fish to sell, and their own livelihood, the livelihood of their crew and the livelihood of their well-being and their family depended on them selling that fish. And yet, because of the chaos of the port and how the boats have to come in and there's not enough space for all of them, each of the captains cooperate with each other. So what will happen is they will all carry the catches of fish over from one boat to another to get to the traders. Now, when they're on the shore, they will each haggle as best they can. So it's each for themselves when they get to the shore. But on the sea side of things, they cooperate to help each other. Now, didn't we see, we're all just emerging from the pandemic. Didn't we see that same spirit of cooperation amongst communities all over the world? People were sharing, people were going shopping for their neighbors, people were doing things. Now that was happening in London, that was happening in New York, that was happening in Elmina in Ghana, that was happening all over the world. So something that I think that our cameras can shine a spotlight on is actually, when you look, we are far more alike than we are different. And those differences are always superficial.
And Paul Choi returns for part two of our conversation shortly. The last few days we've had a decent amount of rain. And, Pinstripe Express pups. Let them go past. And, the greens along this path are beautifully lush. They really are. Fantastically lush. Let me get a picture. I'm going to look back towards the lock, one of the many locks along the canal, through all this lushness, if there's such a phrase. Right, f5.6. Let's check we're not on neutral density filter. We're not. 500th, 160 ISO. Lushness max factor, I think, pups. You're being very good today. The recent walks, he's been far less vocal. He gets vocal nearer the start of the walk, actually, before I turn the microphone on, when he gets just a bit funny about the treats. I want one now. I need one now. Come on, let's do a bit of walking. No, not until I've had a treat. No, that's not the way it works. It's a training treat for a reason. But yeah, he's a lot less vocal, isn't he? He just wanders along here. He's sort of got to know now when I'm recording a piece. And sometimes if I stop, he just calmly sits down and just watches, which is a bit unnerving. If you've been walking anywhere, I'd love to hear from you. It really is important to receive your stories, because they are really what drive the show. So send them to, please, stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. If you're sending pictures, if you can resize them to 2,500 pixels wide, please do. But if you can't, if you don't know how, don't worry. I will say it in tandem here, or unison rather. I will do the heavy lifting. Yes, the heavy lifting. It being the first Friday of the month, it is assignment time for the next month. Now, out the traps. I have been saving this one. I have a file of a few assignments that went okay when we did them, when we were doing it as a weekly. But because some of them were slightly more challenging, a week really wasn't enough to bite into the assignment. So I've been saving a few, and this is one of the ones that I've saved. I think it needed more than a week to think about it and execute an idea. So I'm revisiting and re-editing this one with the editorial and fine art photographer Alice Tomlinson. It is a stretch, this one, a creative stretch, because it is quite layered, but you do have a month, and we might go 1 week over since we're starting a little bit further in. We're a week in before we get to the first Friday, so I might extend it a bit. It's one that I'm really looking forward to seeing how you approach this now that you have a tad longer. So here goes. Good luck, Alice Tomlinson.
The Photowalk assignment.
So an assignment, Alice. Oh, this one is requesting that you take inspiration from something other than what you see, isn't it? In many respects.
Yeah, other than photography.
Yeah.
So the way I often work when I'm starting, for instance, a long-term project, and like you've mentioned, my research, I can be sparked by something almost unexpected. And for Lost Summer, it was a poem by Walt Whitman, for instance. With my latest work, Lee Solani, in the book, it was an inscription I read in a book that had been inscribed on a bell, an old bell in Sicily. So I often find that text brings something to my thought process that is different from just looking at more images. So my idea is that I would like people to take inspiration from, it could be a line from a song, it could be a film title, it could be a line from a book, it could be a poem, and respond to that. So make images that respond in some way to that text.
And 3 images.
I think 3 images that kind of speak to each other, that respond to the text. So it almost forms a triptych. So they're almost, if you were to present them, they would be presented together as a set.
Okay, so they do speak to each other, these images.
Yes,
right.
Ideally, yes, but they also respond to the line that has in some way inspired you.
Fantastic. Poetry, music. I can think of Philip Larkin one straight away, although it's a bit dark, actually, much of
That's okay.
much of Philip Larkin's work. I find that fascinating, by the way, and I didn't realise this, and we certainly didn't hit on this in the interview when I spoke with you, but an inscription on a bell effectively took you to make an entire project.
Pretty much, yeah. I was
Wow.
reading a memoir by a woman who lived in Sicily, and this woman had found this inscribed on a bell in Sicily, and it says, "I cast out demons, I calm the storms, I call to the living, I cry for the dead." When I read that, it sent shudders down my spine, and I thought, wow, that kind of encapsulates the darkness of good and evil, but it talks about the lives we live now. It talks about the elements in nature. It talks about the kind of demons and the darker side of the human spirit. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. That's going to kind of guide my work. And actually in the book, Lee Solani, I have that in the opening of the book, also translated into Italian.
So Alice, to recap then, we're asking listeners to make 3 pictures. It's a triptych, and the inspiration comes from...
So it can come from a line from a novel, it could come from a poem or a certain line from poetry, it could come from a music lyric, it could come from a film title. So a few words that act as a kind of guide for you to create these 3 images, and that the images should speak to each other, but they should also obviously in some way reflect the text that you've chosen.
And I would imagine it would be nice to know that text as well.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's key, I think, as well, to see how you've responded to those words.
And who knows, like Alice, if you find a bell with an inscription on it, it could well take you to Italy. And
who knows where it could lead. Exactly.
Bon chance with this one. Good luck. I need to choose actually one from last month, don't I? Now that we've launched this month's July's assignment, I need to look in my files and find a photograph that particularly caught my eye from last month. Now, because in the same way I approached homework from my school days, because I'm still uploading them, I'm going to cross to my 11th hour studio self that is, to pick, air quotes, a winner from June. Well now, and this is a tricky one, he says. Can you hear me wincing, even in the safety of my studio? Tricky because I really enjoyed all the images, and I genuinely mean that. And particularly when married up with the stories around them. Well, that's the tricky bit, because there are genuinely some beautiful personal stories behind the photographs in this challenge. But I keep coming back to one particular picture. Perhaps it's the Boy Scout in me. Well, a Boy Scout many moons ago, of course, and that's Paul Friday's picture. Let me read his words and then I'll attempt to describe the image. This is the penknife, he writes, I won as Best Scout on Camp sometime around 1975. Those were the days when giving knives to children was an accepted and, in inverted commas, good thing. I should perhaps explain the pale splodge and tape. The splodge is luminous paint and the tape is reflective, as they make it easier to find the knife if you should drop it. Ever the Boy Scout. Well, Paul, notwithstanding, of course, the law and the social feeling on knives understandably changing, but I do remember having my prized field knife and learning to whittle a spear when on camp. The idea, of course, was to go and catch a fish with it. Although in the stream where we were embracing our inner Robinson Crusoe, there resided only sticklebacks, our water boatmen, needless to say, would have received more protein eating our sticks. But what I come back to with your picture, Paul, and it's something that you didn't mention, so I will. It was the way you'd posed your still life item from your childhood. It looks to me, with the lighting and the shadow, it looks like a parrot, actually. The penknife, with its fold-out multi-tools and knife sections, seems to take on, aided by the shadow, the appearance of a tail, legs, and definitely a beak. And for this, well, you effectively grabbed my arm and kept pulling me back to your photograph. So Paul Friday, a famous, not-so-famous flask, will be on its way. Thank you to my studio self. Well, a well-oiled... well-oiled? No, is that the right phrase? Well-honed, well-oiled. Good team, I think. And well done for June. I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with for July. Next week is Visual Stories Week in the feature, roughly in the middle of the show, with Valerie Jardin, and we're covering the art of the grab shot. And there is an art to it, which I think will come in handy. I was listening very carefully to Valerie when she was giving her tips. For our two retreats, Inverness 23, Africa 24. I have to say I'm going into these retreats with renewed storytelling vigour and fervour. And since next week, it doesn't all have a street flavour. It's not all about street next week, but since it has a street flavour, Christopher Parsons, thank you for your it was an in-depth letter. A very thought-provoking letter about identifying people in your street shots and how the new laws are making that trickier. Or are they? Is this all hot air? I will be saving your letter for next week. Watch this space, as they say, newspaper land. What are you doing, pups? Oh, dear. That's really deep there. Are you just leaning in to get a drink? Look, I've got a water bottle here. A Photowalk water bottle. But he'd always rather choose a puddle than he would to drink out a nice water bowl. Is that all right? Have you got that? Yeah, it's tasty. I like that taste. I worked for a fleeting amount of time, not long, I might add, for the Sun and, dare I say, the News of the World. Not particularly for the News of the World, I might add. It was a radio station that was branded with their names. Anyway, first time I walked into the Sun offices, the News International offices, there was a big sign, huge, very imposing sign. A sort of sign that says, you've arrived on our ground. This is our turf. It just said, you are entering Sun Country. Like it was a whole new small state and you might need a passport to get in. It was a complete education to me. Actually it was a reasonable amount of time. It was over a year. That's about 18 months, pups. I don't know why I'm asking you. You weren't even a flicker of a flame of a whatever the analogy is at that time. But I tell you what, it was certainly a very interesting experience. I learned a lot during that time. Right, I want to thank my extra milers, our special community of friends. And, let's just stoop underneath. There we go. The branch there. Yes, our special community of friends, photographers, walkers, hikers who support this show. It's a busy line today. Busy line. Do you remember that song? Busy line. Who did that? Look, it's a music quiz all at the same time. They support the show with a generous donation each month, starting at £3 a month. Without you, I wouldn't be able to dedicate the time to this project in quite the way I do. As I say, and I mean this, it would be an entirely different listen, and certainly not as regular. I call our Patreon community the extra mile because it plays very well into what we do, I think. You go the extra mile for me, so I go the extra mile for you. It's really important to me, that additional episode. There is something happening in autumn, in September. The extra mile is changing slightly. All good, all very good if you're an extra miler, that's for sure. So those that were in the Zoom live show that we had during the week, Wednesday just gone, will know exactly what that is. Watch this space, as they say. You're entering Sun Country. On the extra mile, on the programme that we have each Wednesday, on it this week, our guest was Vicky Robb. And I thought you might like to hear just a few moments from the conversation that we shared.
On this week's Extra Mile.
I've been doing all sorts of exploration, really. I'm coming back again to photographing sort of landscape details, but I do have in mind a project to document the places where my family have lived. So my mum and my mum's grandparents used to be up in Scotland. One side was mining and one side farming, and the landscapes have changed a lot since. Certainly on the mining side up there, so it's much more of a relic landscape. So I've got that sort of kind of in mind as a bit of a project, and they sort of came together in Fife, but one initially were in the Scottish borders, and there's a lot of mining around there, mining history around there, and the other one was sort of Aberdeenshire. So that's in mind. I've got a trip coming up to Yellowstone, Montana, Wyoming, with a photographer who I really enjoy, called David Ward, who does a lot of intimate landscapes, and I've wanted for ages to go to Yellowstone just to see the geology. So I think short term it's going to be more landscape type photography for me.
When are you going on that?
October the 20th. So it should be it will be. I think it might be quite cool and snowy.
You sound like you're counting down the days. October the 20th is at 7:30 p.m. I need to be at the airport.
Well, it's and we're starting, but it's going to be a bit going down and seeing some ghost towns in the mining areas.
Oh, fantastic.
So I'm looking forward to that as well, because I do actually like taking pictures of the materials that we use from the landscape in our buildings, whether that's in steel, in wood, in concrete, all of which originally comes from rocks and earth materials. That's again a sort of driving thing of some of the things I photograph, is how man and environment interact. It's an hour's extra listen if you'd like to walk the extra mile with me this week. Letters. Actually, it's a story of going in search for a particular photograph that I made right at the head of the programme this week. Then it's Vicky Robb. My thanks, Vicky. It was wonderful to talk to you. If you'd like to be an extra miler, you can go to the website photowalk.show, see the support the show, the orange button, press that one, and you'll be there. You'll be able to read all about it. I'll keep going back to the sun. My word. Quick, rescue me, somebody. I know what we'll do. We'll talk about Africa. That'll rescue me. Back to Studio Self once again to tell us about the African retreat. Africa 2024. On January 23rd, the plane touches down at Banjul Airport. Our plane, that is. The door opens and you'll soon be met by the sights, the sounds, the smells, the warmth of the Gambia, the smallest country on the continent, known as the Smiling Coast of Africa, where we'll be spending time with the people of this wonderful, magical place on the West Coast. River trips, markets, wildlife, bird photography, nature photography, villages, music. We'll be working together as a team, making life experience documentary projects.
but you also have time to spend alone with your thoughts and your camera, because that's what a well-being trip is also about. We'll be tasting the food of the region and sampling the wonderful hospitality. It's a 10-day photo trip guided by 3 experienced photographers and filmmakers. This trip, this 10-day experience, is designed to be a retreat, an adventure, an expedition, and just a wonderful chance to spend time with like-minded photographers and walkers. We want you to come away with photographs, new experiences, new friends, and a love like I've found for this wonderful, wonderful country. Each evening we'll talk pictures enveloped by the evening sounds as the sun retreats, and each morning we'll awake to a brand new day of pictorial possibilities, helping each other to tell the story of this magical time away. Africa 24 is limited to 8 to 10 places and is now booking. Shall we meet them on the plane? I'll let you sit next to the window.
So looking forward to that. The retreats are becoming this is the highlight, clearly, talking to you. You know that. But the retreats are becoming a real highlight of parts of the year. We're certainly going to do more, and I'm planning some pop-up meetings and all kinds of things for 2024. Right, here is a letter from Victor Winterglot. I've worked on that pronunciation, hoping that I've nailed it, sir. If I haven't, please write to me. We already have. Victor is in Malmo and lives within sight, or at least a short drive and sight of the amazing Öresund. It's Öresund, isn't it? Because when you have a little line that goes through the O, that becomes an doesn't it? Öresund Bridge, where the E20 rolls into Denmark land. An incredible feat of civil engineering, isn't it? And one that I believe my Uncle Roger helped build, not with his bare hands, granted. He was part of the design team, or a design team from Germany land, that were working on a specific part. I think. I'm thinking aloud here, really, because I haven't fact-checked this. And it was back in, it would have been early 90s. But there can't be many 10 miles and combined, bridge and tunnel projects in the world, can there? So I must have been listening that day properly, and I'm sure this is the one Uncle Roger talked about. If you know him, just fact check that one, would you, for me? Appreciating that there are other Uncle Rogers in the world. This one is This one is a very tall man, walks faster than a sprinter runs, even today, and still remains conflicted about that goal in '66, since he wears 2 colours of football shirt these days. Anyway, 3, 2, 1, I digress. Back to you, Victor. Hey, Neil. Nice to see you diving into the depths of your inbox. All is well here in Swedenland. Since I sent you the drone shot of the drag racing car, there's been a lot of flying. A lot of photographs for the sketchbook, and some worth coming back to. I'd say I've been looking at them. They're incredible. I'm also making photos with my Sony A7 III, and at the moment I'm building an online shop to sell photo art equaling photo posters. Photos that are mainly portraying my nearby environments in the city of Malmo. I'm living in a place called Skanor. And since it's surrounded by the sea, more or less, it's not an island, the general theme is coastal landscapes, which seems to me, Victor, to make a lot of sense. I'm going to link to your work, which is all frankly stunning. It really is, and I can see these as posters and wall art in chic hotels as well. I really can. Don't knock it. It's a good market, by the way, in case you're saying, what, chic hotels? I'm sure Victor can do more than, chic hotels. I'm telling you, it's the future. Unless you're making posters for Premier Inn in this country, which, I love Premier Inn, don't get me wrong, you know that. But as far as I can tell, the same picture of the same flower appears in all the hotels. Boy, I hope that artist is on unit commission. Anyway, it's the abstract ones of yours that I really love. The building in the shape of the question mark, the aerial picture, that is, of the car park, fantastic. Small little cars, like toy cars. I tell you what, the window cleaner shots. So they're not aerial looking down shots. They're aerial looking across shots. But it's a really interesting angle or angles. They were cracking pictures. They really are. And and the one on the front of the it's a car ferry. It's right at the front of the car ferry. That has inspired me to think drone, and if I do drone, I would take that to Africa most certainly, because there's a ferry shot there that I know I'd be emulating yours, but that's not a bad thing. That I think I'd like to try and get there. So you see, you've inspired me greatly on that front. I will leave a link to Victor's Insta on the show page today. Anyway, says Victor, that's sort of where I'm standing in life at the moment. Intense days at my ordinary job as a French teacher. There's nothing ordinary about that. Our pupils will be let free in the coming week, and then summer's lying wide open for both planned and unplanned photographic adventures. Your podcast is still a big source of inspiration, a warm sonic embrace where the segments are stitched together in seamless manner. Interesting guests that have me and your other listener thinking wider and bolder. I'm going to have to hide behind a sofa. This is far too much flattery. I'm impressed by how you, week after week, deliver such high quality content. Bravo! One day, I hope to meet you IRL to deliver a well-earned high five. Or should that be H5. I did have to look up IRL. I thought you meant Ireland at first, which that's good for me as well. I'll meet you in the Curious Cat Cafe for a latte at 10 o'clock. You know the one in Killarney. Beautiful, fantastic coffee. If it's the one I went to, that is. IRL, in real life. In real life. Yes, I know that now. I thought I was being all trendy by knowing FOMO when my younger son didn't this morning. I said, what's IRL? He said, it's in real life, Dad, in real life. Don't you know that? I said, yes, of course I do. FOMO, fear of missing out, he didn't know. Although he did say, we stopped using that in 1842, Dad. That's what I usually get. I was already in his bad books this morning because I disappeared to the studio early doors to write out some notes about your letters this week. So I headed out. The hour was starting with a 5, and Barney I thought was fast asleep, but he wasn't, and didn't take him long. He woke the whole of the house up, whinging to come out and see me. So poor Thomas was sent down to. He was sent down to let Barney out down to the office. I thought, hello, I'm in trouble. And sure enough I was. Barney actually suffers from FOMO. Come this way, Barnes, this way. Good boy. Let's go and see what's down here. Land Rovers by the sounds of it. You suffer from FOMO, don't you? You've got a big fear of missing out sometimes. He sits there of a morning, and he did this morning. He sat there, surveying his world. He sits there at the open, which is lovely in the summer. Sits there at the open office door, and just keeps a watchful eye out over his kingdom. Does Barney? Does Sir Barkalot? Make sure the pigeons don't show up. Has a proper little argument with them. And next door's cat. I know. I don't profess to encourage him to do that. If he sees a squirrel, the magpies, they really wind him up. They sit in the apple tree and shout things down at him. That does wind him up. And they know it as well, magpies. They're cute like that. And squirrels. Hey, Barnes? Squirrel. Where's the squirrel? Usually he barks, I'm telling you. It's almost like he's not here. Anyway, I've digressed far too much. Go check that link out. Maybe I'll put some on the show page, some pictures on the show page as well. I'm digressing a little bit too much this week. There'll be complaints, pups, there will. I shall go and flagellate myself with a damp copy of the Radio Times to make up for it. Anyway, let's rescue this and go for part 2 of my conversation with this week's guest, Paul Choi. And we'll start with making stories on the back of where your feet happen to take you, which is all about serendipity, really, isn't it?
I looked at your Thai boxing story, and it's one of the ways I was introduced to your work, actually, and we mentioned it at the head of today's show. You found that Thai boxing is a way of life in Thailand, both for cultural and aspirational reasons. I wonder how you come across these stories. I know that Thai boxing might seem obvious. You go to Thailand, do some Thai boxing stories, but it's not necessarily. You've still got to go find a story. You've got to find an angle. You've got to find people that you think, oh, no, do you know, I'm really interested in understanding that a bit more.
Yeah, and I think, again, you mentioned, if we're being a little bit cliche, how the universal fate puts things in our way. Yeah. In my own work, I very much lean into the stories we discover. So what I tend to do when I'm going away on assignment, I do a fair amount of research before I go. So, of course, especially if I'm on assignment where I have deliverables, then I need to make sure that I've banked the things that I need. So I'll do a degree of research of what I must get. Then when I actually arrive on the ground, I really don't follow a plan at all. I let my feet carry me. And so most of my assignments, I will literally walk, and I mean actually walk. Generally, of course, you might have a vehicle take you from one place to another, but when we're in there, I will walk around and see what we find. Now, you mentioned the Thai boxing. That was a case. There was a railway track, and I was following the railway track because, as photographers, don't we love a good railway track? And so I was following that. And the Thai boxing gym, which was a backstreet Thai boxing gym. This is not something I'd organised. Yeah. It was just there. I saw some kids warming up outside, and I went to explore. And something, again, when we talk about something universally true that I have discovered, is people want to share. They want to share their story. So in most of the cases, and that was exactly the same thing, the people that I'm photographing, the people I'm interviewing, I've often discovered them a few moments earlier and just got talking to them. And that's exactly what happened there. This was a Thai boxing gym that I just discovered walking along, didn't know it was there, ended up spending an hour and a half with them or so, learning about them and taking photographs, writing some notes, and I was able to share their story.
It's a fantastic story. And writing is an important part of your work, isn't it? That notebook's become ever more important, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is a notebook. I have tried everything. I've tried... I tried wiring myself up with microphones. I've tried to use my mobile phone as a dictaphone to record what people say. It doesn't work for me. For me, it has to be to be a physical experience. A few years ago, I just accepted that was me, and so I have hundreds of these little notebooks, these pocket-sized notebooks that I take with me everywhere, and I write my scribbles into. And for me, the photography does lead. I am driven by visual storytelling, so the writing is to complement the photographs, not the other way around in my case. For me, the words give context. So the photograph can give the emotion of the moment, and the words give a little bit more of the context.
How did you meet Janet Devlin? Mental health issues, I know, are a strong, and forgive the pun, focus of your work. And you shot this story of a singer called Janet Devlin, who brings home really the story of the pitfalls of fame. And as somebody who works in the currency of storytelling and social media and knows about the pitfalls of it, it was interesting to read an account of somebody who you clearly understood.
So I'm kind of going back on what I said earlier about focusing on the everyday folk and not on the celebrities.
No, I appreciate
and Janet Devlin, of course, is a very successful recording artist, made famous, of course, by appearing on one of the early series of The X Factor in the UK. And so at the age of 16, she went from being a schoolgirl to being incredibly famous pretty much overnight. But what was unknown at the time is that she was suffering from her own demons, in particular, the challenges of dealing with her mental health. Yeah. I remember watching her on television. I remember when she appeared on that original series of X Factor. My interest was in this idea. There was the juxtaposition of famous people. We often look at famous people, celebrities, as they've made it, they're successful, but we don't appreciate that they can be ordinary people as well, everyday people, and go through their own challenges. So I was really interested in this juxtaposition of somebody who was on the surface incredibly successful, famous, had an incredible recording career, and yet privately was dealing with alcohol abuse, was dealing with severe mental health issues. She was telling me at the time when I was speaking to her about those experiences, she was telling me about how she was using things like anorexia as her way of keeping her control. That for her, she felt that her career, her life was spiraling out of control, and she couldn't control that, but she could control self-harming. She could control what she did or didn't eat. Goodness. And so it was her approach to control. So how it came about is because I was interested in that juxtaposition, I emailed her.
Right.
So I actually emailed her management company and said, I'm writing an article about mental health at the moment. I'm doing a series of articles, and I'd love to speak to Janet about it. And I think this is something that I've discovered. I think because I didn't come into the industry in a traditional way, as in I didn't train for this. I didn't go to university or do the usual kind of model. So I don't know how things are usually done, which I think has proved to be, in my case, somewhat of an advantage, because then I will take sometimes an unusual approach to it. Yeah. And I went to meet with her at a recording studio in London and spent a whole afternoon. She was absolutely lovely. And the important thing was she was absolutely transparent. She answered every question I asked her. And I asked her some really quite difficult questions. And she answered every question, because her feeling is, or the message she's getting across, is that she felt that she was going through this alone. And it turns out she wasn't. There were lots of people going through it. It's just it wasn't something that was talked about. So if one thing that celebrity does do is it does shine a spotlight on certain issues. So if people can realize that if somebody as successful as that can also be suffering with these demons, then, you know, it's okay for them to be talking about it as well.
Yeah.
Just go and ask. And that's actually what I do a lot of. I will just get in touch and say, can we do this?
Well, it goes back to that hello thing, which I'm sure we'll revisit again. I'm intrigued how you became a goodwill ambassador for the International Organization of Migration. You do turn up in the strangest of, well, not necessarily strangest of places, but the most interesting of places. That must be a fascinating role.
Yes, this came about. As many things I discover, one thing leads to another,
Yes.
And actually, this brings us back to the TED Talk. Somebody in the audience who was at that TED Talk was involved with CNN.
Yeah.
And they got in touch with me afterwards and said they were interested in some of the things that I'd raised in the TED Talk. Could they maybe do a feature for CNN? Now, when CNN say, can they do a feature on you? The only answer is yes. And so, of course, I said yes. And we filmed this feature. It went out on CNN Global for a while. That got seen by somebody who asked me to come and do a talk at their organization, which was an NGO dealing with social injustice. I did a talk at that, and there was somebody from the UN. The IOM is the UN Migration Agency. There was somebody from the UN in the audience who came to speak to me afterwards. They asked me if we can do some work together, and that ended up leading to me joining them as a goodwill ambassador. The intention being, obviously, to again shine a light on some of the work that is being done, because for a long time, and it sounds in the wrong way, but for a long time, the work of a lot of NGOs around the world has been done in the shadows. Mm-hmm. When I mean the shadows, I don't mean it in a sinister kind of way. I mean that they're so busy getting on with the job, they don't necessarily tell people what's happening. So it means that, again, when I come back to this idea of living in an age of populism, if people know what is the situation, then they're able to make an informed choice. And now, as a result of that, I've done some projects recently. I'm just completing a project with them entitled Stories of Migration, where we are documenting the everyday lives of people who have migrated around the world, because so often in the subject of migration, etc., which is a very emotive subject at the moment all over the world, quite often the loudest voices are from people who have never actually experienced migration for themselves. And so this project is about documenting some of the voices of those who have experienced migration, from those who have experienced forced migration through to people that have chosen to move. And so it's a very apolitical project. There's no judgment. It's not about the right or wrong of migrating. It's simply, these are the stories of some of the people that have migrated. So I spoke as part of that project to Syrian refugees in camps in Europe. I also spoke to a millionaire, true story, an American millionaire who hired an entire beachfront resort to escape COVID restrictions. and pretty much everything in between. Everybody's got their story, and so it's just something to express what is happening.
Well, there's one in 30 people, I didn't realise this, would be defined as being migrants. That's incredible.
1 in 30. Yes, and that's according to the UN, that's around 281 million people in 2020.
Amazing.
281 million people. That sounds like a lot of people. Too big a number that we can get our head around. Whereas if you zone into one person or that person, then we can personalize, then we can have a connection. And that's why when we take a photograph of a crowd, you get one idea. But if you zoom in and isolate one person in photography, we get a closer connection. As photographers, we spend a lot of our time trying to work on isolation. This is part of it.
It's probably, and sadly, the reason why that brutal picture of the child that lost their life washed up on a beach in the Mediterranean affected emotionally so many people. I heard something horrific the other day. A story of, it was a guy that phoned into a radio station who was withdrawing his support for the RNLI. Now, you know who the RNLI is. They're the National Lifeboat Institute of the UK, and they're a charitable network in the main. He felt they were aiding and abetting illegal immigration. It's such a difficult subject when people aren't aware. He was asked at the time, well, what should those who signed the pledge to save lives in the water do? Just leave them there and drown? And he said, well, yes. So the work you're doing, the voice that you bring to it is incredibly important. If you can reach an uneducated stance like that at some stage.
Yeah, sure. And I think that, of course, that person that withdrew support from the lifeboats, that person's never going to change their mind about this. And that person almost certainly had an opinion before any of this came about. So we're not talking about the people on the extremes. We're talking about the people who are of moderate opinions, who want to know what is happening. Now, that you mentioned about that little boy who washed up on the beach, that was in Lesbos Island in Greece.
It was, yeah.
And actually it was taken about a week before I arrived on that same island, on the same beach, for a project on the refugee crisis in Europe. So I was in these very same places. Yeah. And something that we all have to think about is, and I had to think about it, what would I do if I was in that situation? Because a week earlier, it could have been me faced. And do I take that photograph?
Would you?
Because I'm not sure we know until we're in the situation. I've got young children as well. And here's a little confession. I've never looked at that photograph. You know, of course, I know what it is.
Yeah.
But every time it appeared, I scrolled past it because exactly what we talked about before, the power of personalizing, it was too close to home for me. Yeah. So you can't help but think, okay, what if that's my child? Yeah. And so I've never managed to bring myself to actually look at it. Now, when I was in Lesbos, I was in the detention camps. And I think people need to appreciate that what we're actually talking about. On that island, there is a detention camp called the Moria Detention Center, where people who have arrived, and again, we're talking about refugees, people who are fleeing war, and they are put into detention centers with barbed wire, with armed guards, and these often are children. So you have 6-year-old children in a prison camp, and they haven't committed any crime, and they haven't been convicted of anything. There will be people with an opinion to say, well, they shouldn't be coming. And while we may have our own opinions about that, those people have a right to that opinion. That is the blunt end of freedom of speech, that we have a right to say things and hold opinions that others completely disagree with. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't inform. The advantages the internet has brought us are our ability to communicate, but it's also brought us disadvantages, that we are now faced with information overload. We have so much information that we have to pick and choose. And invariably, we pick and choose the information which reinforces our existing opinions. So I think we have to take a different approach. I'm not a fan of simply saying to people, you are wrong. Now, some people are just plain wrong, but I doubt there are many people who are deliberately wrong. What we have to do is take people on a journey, good and bad, and reflect. So a lot of my work is without judgment. I try not to say, this is correct and that is wrong. I try to say, this is what I saw with my own 2 eyes. And I think that's important. It's important that the words I write and the photographs I take are from my first-hand experience, so I can talk with authenticity.
You talk much in your stories, both in photography and writing, of how humanity is trying, either willfully or naively, to punch itself on the nose sometimes. Figuratively, that is. You've seen a lot on your travels, and I wonder how somebody who smells the smells of the world outside a YouTube film or a TV documentary, I wonder how you personally feel about the world. Do you have hope? Do you have optimism? You seem a very optimistic person to me.
I am optimistic, and I always do have hope. I am constantly amazed at how much the world can disappoint, and so we all have our dark moments. And sometimes when I see some of the things that I see, I am disappointed, and then something happens that reignites that sense of optimism, and it always comes from nowhere. So I was recently in Madagascar, and I was photographing a lady who was washing her clothes in the river. Now, on the surface, and this, I guess, goes to the heart of the work I like to do. On the surface, if I show somebody that photograph, and I actually wrote an article about it to say, what do you see in this photograph? And on the surface, we would say, we see a lady washing her clothes in the river. So is it about poverty? Is this a story about poverty? She obviously hasn't got a washing machine, so she needs to use the river. But it's not, because like any story, we need to peel back the layers. We need to look deeper. So why would she be washing her clothes in the public river, right where everybody else is? Why is she washing her family's underwear in the public river? Obviously, it's because she doesn't have water at home. It's not she hasn't got a washing machine. She hasn't got water, because if you've got water at home, even if you're washing it with an old scrubbing board, you do it at home. You don't take your family's dirty underwear to the river to wash them in public if you've got water at home. So we peel back another layer. Well, if she hasn't got water at home, she hasn't got a bathroom at home. She hasn't got a toilet at home, which means that the family are having to go into the fields. And if they go into the fields, they're not able to wash their hands afterwards, and they're coming back and they're preparing food. So why is it no surprise that Madagascar suffers? One of the biggest causes of fatalities is from sanitary illnesses because of the lack of water. That wasn't a photograph of a poor person washing her clothes in the river. That was a story of how the things we take for granted. How many of us in countries like the UK, like the States, like Australia, how many of us take for absolute granted going to the tap and filling a glass with water, which we can drink? Or going and washing our hands, or flushing the toilet. We take it for granted until it's not there. And so I think that what the heart of the work I do is about putting into perspective what perhaps other people just aren't seeing. But then I meet the people who are trying to do something about it, and the communities that are trying to help themselves. And then I get inspired. And I have to say that there are more people that inspire than disappoint. The thing at the moment, though, which we need to address, is those who disappoint often have a wider platform. It doesn't mean they're right, it just means they have the platform. Quietly, on the ground, saying absolutely nothing, are the people who are doing the actual work. And those are the people that I like to focus on, because I think that we should find a platform for those. So yes, I do remain inspired because I meet very inspirational people all over the world. I am yet to find how we adequately showcase what they are doing.
At the end of your TED Talk, you talk about how we as humans can get along, can find common ground, can go from, having a them and us thought or approach to being simply a we approach. We're in this together. We're a community where we can somehow learn to coexist. And it all seems to come down to one word. Now, I'm going to ask you to do an entire spoiler on the TEDx talk, whilst also sharing your link and asking people to go and watch it, because it's a great talk anyway. But there is one word that seems very important in your language, and in any language, actually.
And it's not a complicated word.
Nope.
It's bringing down the barriers between them and us, going from where we are strangers standing on our own side of the fence to becoming a collective with a shared sense of community is as easy as saying hello. We need to say hello more. Everywhere I go, what I've discovered is the easiest way to engage in conversation, the easiest way to learn stories, the easiest way to learn about the cultures that I'm experiencing is to walk up to somebody and say hello. Everything else follows from there.
My thanks to Paul, I dare say. We'll have more stories to talk about in the future, Paul. It was a joy talking to you and hearing your sincere enthusiasm for photography and meeting people, being with people and sharing their stories. It was a pleasure to talk with you. You'll find links to his work on the show page today, episode number 388. There's lots of links and films about the stuff of life that we've shared today. And if you're listening in your app at the moment, there will be a link to take you to the show page. And when you visit the page, I'm going to ask you, I know I've asked this favour over the last month or so. Please could you take a moment to share the show? It really does help to build the community. You'll see a link. We've made it nice and easy. And if you're logged into any of the apps, we shall need to add the new one, won't we? What's it called? Threads. We'll have to add Threads. I'm not sure that's available just yet, but you'll see a link. And if you're logged into Facebook or WhatsApp or one of those socials, it will magically open up. You can write a few words about the episode, and it will share on your social network. The Extra Mile is out. And I'm looking forward to walking some more with you. And thank you to our volunteers who help behind the scenes. So that's Neil Ford and Emily Renier, Andrea Gilpin, and Kelly Mitchell, of course, in Canada land. Our playout song today is from Fiona Hart. It's called White Picket Fence. I don't think I've played this one before. Although it was sitting in a folder where it suggested I might have. I'm pretty sure I haven't. If I have, pardon me. But I don't mind because it's a wonderful song, and I do sometimes repeat the songs anyway. I like this. I think it's an airy number for some final frame making, and I'll return after it with a postscript thought for this week. Fiona Hart.
Wind me up and watch me choke. He could build me with feathers and break me with smoke. Holds me till I can't breathe, and his eyes tell me things his mouth can't achieve. Me, I feel 1,000 different ways. Still, I'd rather act than articulate. I've got cracks on my back and my shoulder and my wing. You see, I'm an angel, but I do bad things. And when you want me, well, I'll be gone. So talk to me another time. See, I don't need your recklessness, because I've got mine. Oh, won't you look for me on a different day? I wanna be the one that got away. I wanna be the one that got away. Well, there's always hope to keep us going. I still see a white picket fence and green grass growing. Maybe I was drawing in my head. You know, you're the reason that be the one that got away. Just let me go. You won't need what you don't know. Just set me free. It's your love that's killing me. So talk to me another time. See, I don't need your recklessness, because I've got mine.
That's Fiona Hart and White Picket Fence. We're almost at the pub. Pups, don't tell anyone, will you? That's not work. A little bit of walking, get to the pub. I know. That's our treat, pups, isn't it? I'll make a final frame in a second. Actually, no, let me make that first. It's been, as I say, pups, not all the way through the mud. We're just about to go in the pub. Honestly, I like this. This is a gate that's been, you can probably hear we're getting closer to the road now. There's a siren in the background to break the beautiful peace of the walk we were just having. Well, apart from the pinstriped expresses, of course, going past every now and then. But I like this. I don't think I've made a picture of this before. It's wonderful. It's one of those devoured by nature photographs. It's a sort of gate. It's enough to stop cars and trucks coming down this particular track. Let's have a go. It's surrounded, it's devoured, it's eaten by the nettles. But it's another one of my perfectly lush green shots today. And I do like a nice devoured gate. 5.6 shutter speed, 125th, ISO 320. Here we go. Final frame, final sketchbook for the day. I thought a final quote on serendipity would be good, since Paul Choi seems to have much of that in his work and the talk that we had today. I couldn't decide between these two, but I think the latter one works, particularly for Paul, actually. But I tell you what, try this one on for size. In the changing room of thoughts, let there be room left in your heart for the unimaginable. Serendipity has a way of showing itself just when you feel like giving up. See, I liked it, and I thought it was worth sharing with you, but it felt just a little bit loose in the wrong places, if we're using the changing room metaphor. So this one, I think, fits just right, particularly when I think back to Paul walking along a train track and finding a story just through the figurative tree-lined openings of life. And I'm going to take this to Inverness and Africa, I think, this thought, this way of thinking. What people call serendipity sometimes is just having your eyes open.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.